Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. After I finished Season 3 of Oregairu, I had 3 videos I wanted to make. First, a video on Haruno, really getting into the weeds of why I find her so interesting and that whole can of worms, because if you didn't love the "you can't get drunk" scene, we're not even remotely on the same wavelength. Second, a follow-up to my visual style between Season 1 and 2 video where I talk about the direction in all 3 seasons and how it evolved. But I gotta get a full rewatch in before that, and I also doubt that anyone besides me would find that interesting. And lastly, this scene, the one that people waited 7 years to see brought to screen, the confession. But I also wanted to take a look at this scene from the perspective of those who waited a little under a year for this scene to be adapted from the light novel. Because I don't think a week has gone by where some very assertive light novel reader hasn't insisted in one of my comment sections that reading this series is the only way to properly experience the story of Oregairu. This video will not be a refutation of that assertion. I have a lot of thoughts about what constitutes any given canon and any separation we might put between narrative forms, but I'm mostly curious about how Studio Feel handled the adaptation and any changes therein. I'm not generalizing from this one scene to the show as a whole either. This is just an exploration of this scene in both light novel and anime to see what tweaks were made for the change in medium. And if you don't care about the adaptation but are more just interested in the scene analysis itself, don't worry, there's plenty of that here as well. Because what even is a replay value video about Oregairu without discussing subtext? The first obvious thing to bring up is the very beginning of what constitutes the scene itself, with a significant cut from light novel to anime. In both cases, we're transitioning from the discussion with Yukimon and Haruno, but in the light novel, there's a bit of a pause in the form of a dozen or so lines about Yukino and Hachimon walking together in silence prior to hitting the bridge, and Hachimon's inner monologue. There's some nice scene direction here with the two of them walking apart, but still in sync, but honestly, none of it is critical to the sequence, and that's why the anime cuts it entirely and jumps straight to the first line of dialogue, because it's saving time. You'll find that that's the reason for a lot of these decisions. Is Yukino implying that Hachimon is a scam artist critical to understanding the scene? No, it's a nice callback for later, but it's not necessary, so it's cut. Almost every element removed from the confession scene in the anime is in this establishing part. The major change here, moving them up to the bridge from the start, comes as a double-edged sword in that regard. I happen to like in the light novel the lines about how Hachimon is making the decision to stay with Yukino on this walk despite it being out of his way. If I turned left here, I could make it to the street that led to my home. But as we were walking together, I missed the opportunity to part ways with her. No, that wasn't it. I had many opportunities to leave, but I chose to ignore them all. Settings are really important for stuff like this because on a bridge, there's no left or right turn. You either advance forward or you retreat. There's no delaying a decision or a detour you can make. You're either taking your shot or you're not. And it is not an accident that these lines immediately precede Hachimon getting on the bridge and walking by Yukino's side compared to his following of her prior. All of that is lost in the anime by being on the bridge the entire time, but there are plenty of changes that I like about how the anime tackled this material, which we'll get to in a minute. As Hachimon and Yukino are walking up to the bridge, the use of a wide shot to establish the distance between the two, and then following that up with Yukino left aligned and Hachimon right aligned, highlights the fact that these two characters are not on the same page. Not to mention the literal distance that Yukino has put between them through her actions in previous episodes. This is matched by the dialogue.
あなた本当に何なの？全く意味がわからない。
Before they find common ground on the matter of Yukino's family, with her waiting for him at the top of the stairs. But Hachimon still has to put in the legwork to keep up with her, as she starts off ahead, and he speeds up a bit to walk side by side. That's a nice bit of visual storytelling, matched by the scene direction in the light novel, which at this point is unified in setting, that ties into what Hachimon is about to say in a moment about staying together. Because after they conclude the bit about Yukino's family, Hachimon explicitly says that he pushed the second prom to stay connected to her. In the light novel, Hachimon is the one who stops, causing Yukino to turn in surprise. In the anime, they continue walking together with her slowing down in realization of what that means. It's a shift in the power dynamic. Yukino is the one going through a realization by looking forward, as opposed to looking back at this person she thought she'd left behind. And Yukino's reaction to Hachimon's interpretation of Yui's wish, and her assertion that she's going to get better at communicating causes her to push past Hachiman. I like the physical shifts here because it's meaningful that she's again leaving him behind, attempting to ensure her independence from him, and also achieve Yui's real wish in one fell swoop. In the light novel, this never happens. She's always been in the lead except for a brief moment when they're walking together, and it's Hachiman who stops. I think this is a change that works mostly because we're talking about a visual medium, and the dynamic of watching Yukino cross the threshold that is Hachiman's person and putting this behind her literally does a great job of conveying the light novel line, "She began walking as if to end the conversation, as if to shake off the past." And you won't be surprised to hear that I happen to love the shot selection leading up to the climactic moment. Hachiman yelling after a Yukino whose eyes we cannot see, the point of view shots of the hand reaching out, the self-doubt in the reverse shot, Yukino about to disappear, and the lunge, timed with the final echoes of that lone note.
だから手放したら二度とつかめねえんだよ。
This is an incredibly dramatic scene in the anime, accentuated by the slow-mo queued up in the sound design, and visually arresting thanks to our seeing of Yukino's eye for the first time since she passed by Hachiman. And saying that line after grabbing hold of her is just... It's also the biggest tonal change from the LN. In the light novel, it reads incredibly awkwardly. Hachiman himself describes it as looking terrible, with bike in one hand, grabbing the jacket cuff instead of her hand with the other, and that's nothing to say for the dialogue pacing in the sequence, which is all top-heavy, with even that awesome line coming before he actually grabs onto her. I think longtime viewers of my channel already know that I love this change for the anime, because it takes advantage of the visual medium and puts incredible emphasis on the extremely corny, but also apt line, "If I let you go, I won't be able to grab hold of you again." It's also just cooler and way more dramatic, and I realize that that is absolutely not the intention in the light novel, because on no planet do you have the character internalize how their hand is sweaty if it's supposed to be this really grand moment. I would argue in the light novel this is because the priority is placed less on the spectacle and more on the actual words spoken later in the scene, and specifically on what cannot be said, whereas here, this is the moment that carries us into the important dialogue. It's a tonal shift between the two, and if you prefer the more realistic take, you'll probably prefer the light novel's handling of this material compared to the anime's, but I really appreciated the tension release of this moment in how the anime handled it compared to the light novel. And it's worth noting that from here on out, the LN and the anime are more or less identical. The light novel scraps basically all scene direction at this point and focuses its efforts on dialogue and internal thoughts to expound on the subtext of the spoken word. And I think that plays to its benefit because the pacing, especially in the final moments of this scene where Yukino is listing her flaws and Hachiman is acknowledging them without missing a beat, perfectly plays against the long monologues that make up so much of the parts that we've discussed so far. I love the setting shifts at the start. I appreciate the more realistic nature of the light novel. Hachiman feels so much less sure of himself here. And the reminder that this opening up of himself is as hard for him as the genuine scene was, metaphors to chiseling the words out of himself, as opposed to the anime portrayal, which plays him with much more confidence. I said at the top of this video that I wouldn't say whether one was better than the other, but I can say assuredly that they have their own strengths, and I feel better for having read and seen both than I would have for just one alone. Back to the anime analysis then. A nice touch here is the POV shot from Yukino of Hachiman grabbing her hand. It gives us some proper focus dedicated to this bridged connection, nice little combo of setting and scene direction there, and highlights when she shifts to looking at him, where we can see how he's struggling to form the words. There's a bit of sensitivity to the sequence thanks to the close-up shots and the piano track in the background. The temporary nature of this moment highlighted when they separate, pull away a bit, and then when we see Yukino fiddling with her cuff. I also love the following shot where we can't see Hachiman's eyes, and he's out of focus, so naturally we're looking at Yukino's reaction to him saying that he wants to stay involved with her. It's not out of obligation, he's not relying on when Yukino said the words, "save me someday," like he did to try and be involved in the first prom, or how he began to couch his words when he was with Yui earlier this episode, having to slap himself for falling into that rut again. It's because, as he turns to camera,
義務じゃなくて意志の問題だ。だから、お前の人生歪める権利を俺にくれ。
And Yukino, Because both of these characters are bad at communicating, and maybe a faint reminder to the genuine scene where she had no idea what he meant by genuine, has no idea what he means by distortion either, but this time clearly asks what Hachiman means by that. Distort, I think, works in two contexts here. The first is the micro level that Hachiman outlines, that the nature of being involved in each other's lives will have no large impact on the shape of their path. Hachiman describes this as going to university and then getting jobs, but that it will have small changes where they'll have to make decisions with another person in their consideration. There will be arguments and frustrations, new opportunities, and missed ones as well, none of which would happen without each other's involvement. And Yukino responds to that aspect by acknowledging that they've been distorting each other since they've first met. It's no different than the way that they've been slightly changing each other's lives from episode 1.
出会って話して知って離れてその度に歪んだ気がする
And these minor steps all build into the macro level type of distortion, the second kind of context, where these two individuals slowly change to fit each other better. Because all of those micro changes slowly compound over the course of their lifetimes, almost like gears clashing and slowly shifting to fit each other better. As Hachiman's monologue in the light novel puts it, I was someone who was too twisted, and she was someone who was too honest. Every time those warped parts clashed, our shapes would gradually change, eventually to the point that they couldn't be undone. And this is all said, and goes unsaid, as Hachiman and Yukino look out at the cars passing below, slowly making their way into the potential future that they are discussing. It is also this moment that I would like to take to really highlight these dark blues that so define this sequence, given the night sky, and how this contrasts so well with the earlier sequence with Yui, which had bright oranges, both in terms of the color palette, but also in the results of these sequences. This is Hachiman's choice, after all. As Yukino pushes back on the idea that their lives are unequal in value, and Hachiman responds with sarcasm, Yukino says,
なんでそんなどうでもいいバカみたいな言葉はペラペラ出てくるの？もっと他に言うことあるでしょ。
And we already know the answer to that question from way back at the start of this episode, where Hiratsuka asked a very similar question.
君の気持ちは言葉一つで済むようなものか?
Because, as he says there, this isn't something that words are enough to convey, certainly not a single one. And so Hachiman similarly does not answer here. It would be dishonest to suggest that the totality of his feelings could simply be condensed into one word. That decision is, in part, a reflection of the genuine scene. Words are insufficient to achieve understanding. It is the understanding beyond words that Hachiman desires, and it is possibly realized when Yukino parallels another of those moments earlier in the episode. As she begins to describe her weak points, things that Hachiman knows and acknowledges to her one by one, it has a beautiful mirror in Hiratsuka writing down all of the things she feels about Hachiman, which are mostly negative.
まだまだこんなもんじゃない。けど、そういうのを全部ひっくるめて。君が好きだよ。
Which brilliantly translates similarly to
それから
いいよどんなにめんどくさくてもいい厄介でもいい逆にそこがいいまである
The one line cut from the adaptation is even more blatant here, but the general vibe is held true. Even in the confession scene, Hiratsuka is an irreplaceable part of what causes Hachiman to grow. In the final moments, as the insert song begins to play, and Hachiman forgoes the law of equivalent exchange, giving his whole life for nothing, combining words with actions as he grabs her hand yet again, Yukino fully closes the distance between them and asks for his life. Hachiman acknowledges how heavy that is, almost out of reflex for snark, to which Yukino says the final line in the sequence, "I don't know any other way to say it." Even at the end, the word love was simply insufficient to get across the depths of emotion interwoven over 3 seasons of interactions. 2 characters who suck at communicating by their own admissions, whose feelings were attempted to be conveyed through words and what went unsaid, but the only way to get across their feelings, to achieve genuine understanding, well, as usual for Oregairu, the most important line is in the title drop.